Hi, platform. My name is Ayana Gray, and I'm the author of Beasts of Prey. And today we're going to be talking about plotting a novel and plotting a trilogy. This is my book, Beasts of Prey. Here's the cover, and this is the pretty sprayed edges version from Waterstones. Beasts of Prey is a young adult fantasy novel. It's also a Pan-African inspired young adult fantasy novel, and it follows two Black teens named Kofi and Ekon who come from very different backgrounds but end up crossing paths in an unexpected way, and they decide to team up to go into a magical jungle and hunt down a monster. And of course, as soon as they step into this jungle, nothing goes according to plan and they get far more than they expected. So one of my favorite YA authors is Leigh Bardugo. I think she's a lot of people's favorites. And I remember listening to an interview where she talked about how she plotted Six of Crows, which is, of course, a really complicated heist story. And she said something that has always stayed with me. She said kind of basically whatever it takes. And I remember that because I'm somebody who doesn't necessarily have one linear process when I'm plotting out a novel. I sometimes will, if I need to, I'll write it out. Like I will just get a pen and paper and a blank page and I will write, because writing is slower than typing, and sometimes doing it that way helps me think through ideas. Sometimes I really like to use Scrivener, which is a writing software that's really for writers, and I can move things around and create virtual and digital post-it notes, and I love doing that. Sometimes I'll pull up Microsoft OneNote, and I'm saying all this to say that I tend to kind of use whatever, and it's a weird mind trick. Sometimes I'll change the font of an outline that I've created, and changing the font helps me look at it differently. So originally, I actually didn't plan for Beasts of Prey to be a trilogy. I tried to fit all three books into one book because I got some really bad writing advice on the internet that said basically don't write series. If you're an unheard of or a debut author, nobody wants a series. Try to write a standalone book. So that's what I tried to do, and it was actually my literary agent who said, this is a really ambitious story, and I actually think this is more than one story packed into one book. And it was like as soon as he said that, this light went off in my head, and I realized, oh, I have permission. I can write more than one book. And once I started to kind of think that way, the story really continued to develop and unfold, and it got bigger and bigger. I'm somebody that really enjoys world building. So when people say things like, do you start with story, like plot or character first? It's actually neither. I start with world, and I think about the kind of world and setting that I'm telling a story in, and then I ask myself what kinds of stories could fit into this world. And then after I know the kinds of stories that can fit into this world, I ask myself what kind of characters could fit into that story. So I kind of work macro and get smaller. So I had this big, vast world that I started out with. And then, it's this city where there is a magical jungle bordering it, and there's a monster that's coming every night and killing people. And I started to wonder what kinds of stories could be told in that kind of world, which led me to, what if there was a young man who was part of the warrior group who was meant to protect people from this monster? And what if there was a girl who worked with monsters in a magical zoo and had all this knowledge? And what if they had to work together? So it's a lot of what if. I certainly try to plot out as much as I can with my books, with trilogies especially. It's really helpful to know where you're going. But the truth is, sometimes, I'll be plodding along and writing, and an idea will just hit me. And that's the fun part about being a writer, is sometimes inspiration just comes and you chase that until you can't anymore. And so I plot a lot, but I always leave myself a little bit of wiggle room to see where the story takes me. So I've actually just finished writing book 2. I'm setting up for book 3 now. I have a rough, hazy idea of what's going to happen, but I actually don't know entirely what will happen, and that's the fun of it. One thing that I discovered in my writing journey was that I tend to write better in 4-act structure. That's something that really helps me, especially with the middles of books. Middles tend to be kind of tricky. And for me, it was easier to think about an even number of parts instead of one little one, a third small one, and then a really big second, plot act 2. What I'll actually do with a book when I'm plotting a book is I'll come up with a word count, and like a rough word count. I usually write about 120,000 words per book. Divide that by 4, so I know kind of, where I need to be for each act. And I'll start to think about the major kind of beats for each act. So there's always the inciting moment in Act 1 that sort of gets the story going. Then there's always Act 2 that sort of thrusts our main characters into their main adventure. Act 3 is when things start to get tough and you have these pinch points. And Act 4 is the big finale and conclusion, or the thing that propels us into the next book. So again, I'm starting really big, and I kind of size down and get smaller and smaller as I get more into it. But I definitely love to use outlines. I work very, very much chronologically, so I have to have the beginning set before I can move on to the next piece and the next piece and the next piece. That's sort of my very hairy, very messy process. So Beasts of Prey actually has 3 points of view, which is interesting because 2 of the points of view, Kofi and Ekon, are obviously there together on this adventure, experiencing things. They're experiencing the same things, but in different ways because of their backgrounds. And then there's a third mystery POV who has her own emotional arc. When we think about character arc and plot arc and how to make those things come together, there's a really great book that I read called Story Genius. I think the author's name is Lisa Crone. She's fabulous. And that book really helped me think about, and I'm going to mess up the terminology, but basically external and internal journeys. So when, for example, I have 2 characters who have a very clear goal. Their goal is to go into this jungle, find a monster, and bring it back out. And they both have different personal reasons for it. For Ekon, he wants to do it for honor because he wants to prove himself worthy. And for Kofi, she's doing it, because she wants to sell said monster and get paid some money so that she can leave her indentured servitude at the Night Zoo. Those are both very much external goals, but then we have, these internal goals that go a little bit deeper. For Ekon, yes, he wants to be a warrior, but beneath that, it's about him proving himself worthy and him proving himself a man. And for Kofi, it's about being free from the Night Zoo, but internally it's about her escaping a life that she's not happy with. She's got a lot of kind of family drama that's caused her to be in this situation that she's trying to kind of escape and avoid as well. So it's creating internal and external conflicts. I think another way to think about it might be what the character wants versus what they need, and trying to kind of marry those things together. And then that helps me with plot because along the way, I'm having the characters face things that force them to confront their internal kind of conflicts. So, Ekon's trying to prove himself a man, and he's put in these situations where he has to rely on a girl, which is kind of against everything that he's been trained to do. Kofi has been raised in a situation where she doesn't have a lot of trust, and she tends to be sort of impulsive and not want to plan. And now she's partnered up with somebody who does nothing but plan, and she has to trust someone that she doesn't know and work together with someone. It's one of those things that I can talk about it, but it's hard to even explain. I do it, and I will say, like, sometimes I'll follow one rabbit hole and realize, oh, that's not right, and I'll have to backtrack out and try again. And a lot of it is throwing noodles at the wall and seeing what sticks, and then once it sticks, like, grabbing onto it. I have 2 degrees, actually. I have a degree in political science, and I have a degree in African and African American studies, which was helpful because Beast of Prey is a Pan-African inspired fantasy. A lot of the characters are named after Pan-African leaders and revolutionaries who fought to decolonize different areas of the African continent. So I was lucky that I had a lot of that background knowledge from my degree, but that was more background knowledge on the political and historical aspects of things. I didn't actually have a lot of knowledge about African mythologies, plural, because different regions of Africa have different deities and different mythologies and traditions and languages and cultures, and you understand there sometimes is overlap, but they are definitely distinct. I think West African is probably the one that's most familiar, but Beasts of Prey actually draws on mythology from East Africa, Central Africa, and Southern Africa, in addition to West Africa. And it was tricky, I won't lie, like doing research for mythologies across Africa had its challenges. You always have to, when you're doing research, ask critical questions about the source itself. So who's writing this? What's their objective? What's their background? What do they stand to gain or lose by telling this particular story this way. There were a lot of translated stories that were translated by often European scholars, professors, anthropologists. And so you have to kind of have a critical eye when you're reading those kinds of translations and accounts. But, oh, and the other challenge I'll say is that a lot of, I don't like to say African, but I will say, generally across Africa, a lot of traditions are told orally. So finding written accounts was more challenging. But fortunately, there have been more pushes in the last few decades to more carefully preserve these traditions and mythologies and stories. I actually have a book on Bantu mythology next to my bed. And so, sometimes just digging, using things like Google Scholar and JSTOR to find articles and finding books, buying obscure books about different mythologies from different parts of the continent. And looking for consistencies too, like looking when I see something that's stated more than once, not just in one random obscure book. So sometimes what will happen is let's say I'm working on Act 1, I'm very much in the beginning, and sometimes it's an idea, or sometimes it's just a bit of dialogue that I know is going to go into the book later, will come into my head. I've learned from experience that it's best to try to capture that in the moment. So what I'll do, especially with software like Scrivener makes this very easy. I'll open up a separate document where I will kind of jot down the dialogue, the scene, whatever that's in my head, so I have it, and then I'll go back to writing, in order. I really do need to write in order because if I change something in Act 1, it could have ripple effects. But I have that scene or that idea off to the side and ready to go. And that can be fun because it's sort of a motivator. Like, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get to Act 3 because I get to write, this kissing scene, or I get to write this really funny joke that I came up with. So the ideas definitely don't always come chronologically, but I really do try to force myself to write in order. And that's really for myself, for consistency, because if I decide to kill off a character, or if I decide to add in a character, I want it to be consistent throughout, rather than it being like, where did they come from? Or I thought they were dead. And it, especially with fantasy, I feel like this is particularly important with fantasy because these books are just so big. You have not lived until you have scrolled on Microsoft Word through a 400-page book. And you're just like, where did I put this character? And you're trying to do control find and find that one line. That can be really tiresome. So it's just really important for me to try to write in order and fix things in order. That said, I'm a creative and things sometimes just happen and I have to go with it. I think the big thing I would have told myself in 2015 when I started to write Beasts of Prey is not to put so much pressure on myself to write the perfect first draft of a book. I would look at authors who I really admired. I think about back in 2015, this was, I think, the year that Six of Crows came out. This was the year that An Ember in the Ashes came out. Those are two of my favorite books of all time. And I really admire Seba Tahir and Leigh Bardugo. I remember thinking, gosh, I can't write like them. They're just so good. And I felt badly because I would look at my own first drafts and be like, this is terrible compared to these great books. And I wish that I could tell myself, those are great books, but once upon a time they were messy first drafts too. And that's how everybody is. Your favorite authors, your favorite books, they all once started as messy first drafts. And especially with that first draft, or sometimes people call it a zero draft, it's just about getting the whole story on paper. And when I say it can be as messy as you want, it could literally be like, insert fight scene here, and then move on. But really, that draft is to tell the story to yourself. Have fun, add the ridiculous ballroom scene, add the kissing scene, add the scenes where your character does nothing but talk to their friend, and do all of those things. You can always go back, you can always revise, but really don't put pressure on yourself to write a perfect story for the first time. Nobody does that. And I know some pretty talented authors, and I'm telling you, nobody does that. The other thing too is, if you want to be an author or a writer, you've got to get used to sharing your work. Find a community. I could not have gotten through this journey without a community, and I was lucky to find a lot of really fantastic friends, through social media, through Twitter, actually, just by saying. And I think, giving what you want back, putting out what you want to get back is important. So maybe don't start as who wants to read my story. Start by offering to read for some people and create a partnership where you read for someone and they read for you and you're both improving. Find people who are ahead of you in this game. Find people who are in step with you on this journey, who can understand, the unique kind of the whole parade of feelings that come about from being a writer. There's an author named Lauren Blackwood who we queried literary agents together. We got rejections together. We lamented together. We both signed with literary agents within a few days of each other. Our books ended up publishing within a few months of each other. And it's having her friendship and having someone who uniquely understood what it was like to go through this has meant the world. So find your people. And that goes for anything, not just writing. Find your people who are doing what you want to be doing, and really lean into that community. That's some of the research I did, but I was fortunate to have, a base to work from. Thank you guys so much for watching. I had a great time talking with you. Don't forget to drop your favorite trilogy in the comments and subscribe to Platform for more videos like this one.